Hello everybody, welcome back to Spirited Food. This is Chef Andrew. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Firstly, join our school community. There's a lot more recipe videos on there. It's growing all the time. It's free to join. There's lots of nutrition stuff on there, so if you're looking to get healthy, you're looking to change your lifestyle, join that school community. Be a part of something that is really going to help you. This video, I'm liking to pick one item and chef it up. And that means to me, I'm going to showcase it in a couple of different ways. I will present it with some things that you may not have thought of or you may not be familiar with. I think it's exciting and delicious. You let me know what you think. Like, share, and subscribe this video, and also pass it along to someone you think it might benefit. Thanks for watching, and let's get into the butternut squash video. This one also has two parts, because remember, we're using butternut as our theme. Two different preparations. We have the butternut squash, which you can see the skin is light tan in color. We have the honey nut squash, which is a little smaller. It's a little bit sweeter than a butternut, and the skin is a little bit darker. That's how to tell the difference between those. These just started coming available. This is a beautiful organic honey nut. They grow exactly the same way. They look exactly the same on the inside. And I'll show you how to prep those. So the first part is where we're going to use the top part of this butternut for the first preparation, which is a roasted butternut squash, which is a great way to eat butternut squash. And then this bottom part, this is called the bowl. This is where all the seeds are. So this bottom part would be the bowl here on this honey nut squash. We're going to steam the bowl and use that to make a delicious sauce. And here's the parts to the sauce. It's going to have in it garlic, ginger, turmeric root, looks like this. You can see the orange in color. If you can't find the turmeric root, it's okay to use just the dried powdered turmeric. That's totally fine. We're going to use a little bit of jalapeno in there. And lastly, gochujang, which is a fermented Korean chili paste. And it's red in color. It looks like that. We're going to use a little bit of that in the sauce as well. So before we get into the sauce, we need to prep these butternuts. So here's the tools that you're going to need. You either are going to need a good peeler or a good chef's knife, because this peel is firm and fibrous and you just don't want to eat it. So the best way, and I'll show you on this honey nut just because it's a little easier to do. The best way to do this is get your knife first. We're going to trim just below the stem. You can see right there, we're not going to cut a whole lot off. We just want to be able to go right underneath the stem. And the same for the flower end. We want to just create a little flat surface that's just underneath here. There's no need to cut really deep and waste a bunch of this squash. We want to maximize our vegetable usage. So the first cut is going to look like this. You can see I did not take much off at all, but there's my stem. And the same thing on this side. I only need to take off just enough to kind of open up this bowl part. So the first way, if you don't have a good peeler, there is a way that you can do this. And this is why I made this part flat, so that this can be stable on my board. It's not going to roll around too much. And I open this up so that I can see this little yellow line is where the peel is. So I only need to cut just behind that line. So what I'm going to do is use my knife to just try to cut behind the yellow, and that's all I want to try to take off. Now, I'm right-handed, so I will always turn to the right, and when I create this line here, I want to try to line up that line with my next cut. I also don't want my pieces to be much wider than this, because the wider my piece, the more of this flesh I'm cutting into. And right now you can see I'm minimizing how much I'm taking off. Because we don't buy squashes just to cut them away and throw them in the trash. That doesn't make any sense. So we want to use good technique to try to minimize how much we're going to waste. So this is the way that you would get that done with your knife. And you can tell that I'm traveling sort of in and out to try to not cut into this bowl too much. So that's the knife technique to do that. That's too fussy for you. That's okay. Just grab your peeler and start about halfway down and just start peeling until you get just under. You'll see these little green or yellow stripes that are just under the skin. You can see one right there. You want to go just underneath that to where everything is just bright orange. And you don't need to go any further than that. So honey nuts are really good because right under the skin is a little bit of a lighter texture, a lighter color I mean, and you just keep peeling until you get right underneath that. You see how as soon as I get down to the orange, that's it, I'm done. And now we peel this bowl part. Okay, we're done. That is a perfectly cleaned honey nut squash. Let me compost this peel real quick. Just every time you finish a task, you should clean off your board because it helps control the chaos. I find it hard to work if there's a bunch of stuff going on my board, so I like to keep everything clean. Okay, remember the shape of this where the bowl flared out just slightly? Well, this honey nut is telling you where the seeds are going to start. So my theory is always, if I don't have to mess with the seeds, I will always cut around them. So I'm going to cut this about right here just to try to avoid all the seeds, or as much of them as I can. And you can see there was very little seed in the top of that. And there's all my seeds in the bottom. So what I want to do now is I can cut on this side and that side. So again, I'm just minimizing how much I'm going to have to deal with these seeds, and now I want to cut on these sides. And if there's still a significant amount left on these sides here, I can still take that off and use it. Because again, we want to maximize how much we get out of this. And then depending on how thick this bottom part is, you can take all this off and still use the bottom. And here's all my seeds, generally in one piece. I'll take that away. I'm just going to clear all these seeds real quick, again, just to keep my board tidy. Now any little bits that are left, I'll just use the back of my knife to scrape those out. And since all of these are all the odd shaped pieces, this is what my sauce is going to be made from. This is going to be a puree, so it doesn't matter really what this looks like. So I will put these in their own bowl. And with the top of it, now that we don't have any seeds to worry about, you can cut this. We want to get bite-sized pieces. So I want to cut it just as wide as a bite, which to me is about that tall. And the center of this was not so great, so I'm not going to keep that part. But I will show you what I'm going to do with this. So again, I just want bite-sized pieces. This is a little large. I'm going to cut this just right in half, like that. With these, I'm going to cut them twice, and then twice again. So I'm trying to just maintain about the same size pieces. Since these are, if I were to cut these in half lengthwise first, it would make them too skinny. So I'm just going to manage my size pieces this way and make them just slightly skinnier like that. And again, does not have to be perfect. We're just generally looking for about the same size pieces. Okay. So these are going to be our roasted squash. So get yourself a bowl. And we want to drizzle some olive oil on them. Just enough to glaze them, not a ton. Add a little touch of salt. And then toss to coat. You want to make sure that they're all shiny and glazed like that. And then I have my parchment lined little baking pan here. I'm going to pour these out on like so. So off to the side, my oven is preheated at 350, and these are going to go in. Now what I don't want is, I don't want everything to be all spread out like that. I want to keep my butternut squash herd all together, because this helps them cook more evenly that way. When one wanders away, this one's going to cook faster than everything else, and this is probably going to burn. So I want to keep them this way. And after about 15 minutes, I'm going to come back and check on them, and I will probably toss these around and then tighten them back up, which I'll show you that in just a minute. Remember my pieces? I'm going to add just a little bit of butternut to those, because I don't think we have quite enough with that one honey nut. So I'm going to treat my butternut exactly the same way. And if it's really tall, this would be very hard to cut if you're doing it with a knife. So in that case, I would cut it where we cut right above the bowl again, and then I would use my knife to take the peel off. But in this instance, I'll just use the peeler again, take this off. Now, since this is a butternut, you can see more clearly these green stripes. These are all the fibers that are right under the skin. So when we're peeling butternut, you want to make sure that you keep peeling until you don't see that green stripe anymore. So you can still see the remnants of it right there. So that gets one more peel. And if you get a bad spot like that, the end of this peeler, you go in and just hollow that out. In case y'all didn't know, that's what that little scoop is for on the end of your peeler. almost there. Okay, now that is what a totally cleaned butternut looks like. No more of those green fibrous stripes left. Again, I'm just going to take a second to clear my board. You won't need the peeler again, so you can set that aside. Okay. So I might want to save this part of the butternut for another use. But just like we did with the honey nut, see, that's perfect. There's no seeds at all in there, and it's generally this is a flat surface. So now I can just cut this into dice like we did before. And this is the bowl part. Again, I'm going to cut on either side. Now take my little short sides off. Now these sides are thicker than that small little honey nut squash, so I am going to make sure that I get most of this off. Most of this usable squash, I want to throw it in there. Okay, so I'm going to go right underneath all the seeds like that and take this whole block of seeds out. And again, that way I don't have to mess with them because I have this whole piece. I just need to trim that off because that's where the butternut flower was. So I can either cut around it or just use my paring knife to just go around and cut that off. Like that. Done. Okay, so finally, check every piece for seeds and add it to the bowl. This one has 1 or 2, and this one just has a few. You can also get a little spoon. If you don't want to do it with a knife, you can always get a spoon and just, scoop that part out. Just like that. And then you have a nice, clean little piece of butternut. Okay. So now I think we have plenty. I have my steamer set up behind me. I'm going to put this in the steamer. Okay. While that butternut is steaming, we're going to get everything ready for the butternut puree or the butternut sauce that's coming up next. So we get back out all these ingredients. First thing we're going to need 1 kind of medium clove of garlic, or like that one. That's a large one, that's a little too much, so we'll just use this clove here. And since this is going to be made in the blender, we can just throw everything right in there. I don't want to smash my garlic, I just want to loosen up the skin so I can take it off. The skin is very thick. Okay, so my garlic goes into the blender. And then this turmeric root, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can use a spoon to scrape. The skin is very thin, so you can just scrape that off like that. You could also use a knife to scrape it, and it's a little more, the knife digs in a little more than a spoon, and it's kind of sprays a little bit. Barring that, you can also use your peeler and just do a very gentle peel on it. so that you don't dig into the root too much, because as I said, the skin is very thin. And we don't need a whole lot of this. We probably only need about half a teaspoon chopped, so I'll get rid of these little bits first. And so to really chop it well, what you want to do is, just like we did with our shallot in the last video, you want to make some parallel incisions in there. You can see how I cut that. It's like a little fan right now. Now we make perpendicular cuts this way, and our intention is going to be to create a very, very small cube when we come back across here. We now have a very, very small turmeric root dice. And that really just helps the blender kind of mix it up well. We're doing some of the blender's work ahead of time. Once you start to see these rings, you know that you've reached the end of where you made all of your cuts. So that's my fresh turmeric, and that's very spicy to add. That's kind of the point of what we're doing right now. So this remaining turmeric root I'm going to set aside and leave it for another purpose. That brings us to ginger. Much the same way, ginger has very thin skin as well. You can use a spoon. You see how a spoon just starts to take it right off? This skin is very thin. You can also use your knife to peel it. I just needed to trim that end up a little bit. Make sure if you're going to cut towards yourself ever, which I never recommend, don't ever touch the blade. My grandma used to do that, and I always wondered how she did that. She would touch her thumb with her little paring knife when we were peeling apples together, and I didn't learn until years later that her knife was just really dull, so she could never cut herself, and I kept cutting my thumb. I just thought that that's the way you were supposed to do it. And it turns out it's just her knife was dull. It's pretty funny. Okay, about the same amount of ginger. And again, you can prep this the same way with the spoon or with the peeler or with your knife. I just chose to do it with my knife this time just to show you a little bit of a different way, but we're doing the exact same thing. Small cuts, now perpendicular cuts. And again, we're going to come back through this way, so that we are creating a very small dice of ginger. Like that. And this tells me, these larger pieces tell me that I'm at the end of where I made my cuts. I'm actually not going to use all that because that's a lot of ginger to go in here. If you're a fan of ginger, you want to ginger it up, that is totally fine. I find that it's always easier to add more ginger. Okay, jalapeno. I'm going to make, depending on your spice level and what you like, this jalapeno is not very spicy, but I'm going to make about 12 slices, and I'm going to drop those in here. And my gochujang. Remember, this is my Korean chili paste. I'm going to add a good half, 3/4 teaspoon. This is my favorite part. I will probably go a little heavier on this. It's not super spicy. It's just real flavorful. I'm a big fan. And then a little chicken stock, because it is a sauce. We're going to need that to get the right consistency. And then as soon as our butternut is done in the steamer, we will bring these together and blend them to a smooth puree. Alright, our butternut is ready, the one that's been in the steamer. And what you want to check for, and this is the honey nut, they're very fork tender. Alright? So these can go straight into the blender. We're going to blend to a smooth paste. Alright, now is the time also to check for seasoning, but we wanted a very thick coating consistency, like this. That's exactly what we wanted. And you can really smell all those spices coming through in there. That is good. It needs just a little pinch of salt, like that. Alright, our sauce is done. Alright, so these have been in for about 15 to 18 minutes. I forgot to set a timer, but I will show you what those look like. So here's what we're looking for. Whenever you're roasting squashes like this, they're just starting to get a nice little crust on the outside. There's a little bit of crispness, but on the inside, they're still very moist. And if you look on the bottoms of some of these, you can see the light brown color. They're starting to caramelize, and that's what we want, that nice light brown color, because that means flavor. So these are ready. They're definitely soft all the way through. They're delicious and they smell really, really sweet. So there's two ways you could plate this. You could just toss these with the sauce and call that done. Or you could make them a little bit more like an entree and say like this. Put your roasted pumpkin on a plate. I have a little bit of cilantro sliced. You just put a little cilantro on there. And I have basil also, some fresh basil. Just a little bit of basil. And then our sauce. That nice spicy pumpkin sauce. Put that around. And if you want, just a few pumpkin seeds for some extra texture. That is really delicious and beautiful. So we have, again, flavor, color, texture, variety. It's all there.